Good morning, everyone. We've got a good turnout today. So I'm here to talk to you today about AWS security solutions and giving you the information as technical decision makers that you need to make informed decisions about what you're going to be implementing within AWS. As you can see, we've got a wide variety of security solutions. Today, I'm going to be focusing in on detective controls and a little bit of incident response. We've got another session coming up this afternoon, Top Security Myths Dispelled, at 2:40 in this room. It's a really good session, and I would encourage you to come and watch that. And that'll get a bit more into infrastructure security, patching, and a lot of the encryption stuff. They'll fix that. So on detective controls, I'm going to talk to you about, first up, CloudTrail, VPC flow logs, and then a new service that just got launched at reInvent last year called GuardDuty, and encourage you to turn that on in your accounts. After that, a little bit about AWS Config and Config Rules. And then I'm going to be handing over to Steve Stajanowski from Australia Post, and he's going to take the second half of this session and talk to you about how they're scaling their DevSecOps practice at Australia Post. So CloudTrail, what do you need to know? So CloudTrail will record a log entry for every activity that anybody performs in your AWS account. Anytime anybody performs an action using the console, the command line, or through the API, it will record the activity and then deliver it to you. And so these things are things like create users, create a bucket, start an EC2 instance. So it's enabled by default on all accounts, but that only retains 7 days of information. And if you want a longer period of retention, you can have it delivered to an S3 bucket. So they're delivered in gzip JSON files about every 5 minutes. And because it's in an S3 bucket, you can control the retention of those logs for as long as you want. You can keep them indefinitely. You could say, we want to keep about 12 months online and then put in a policy to archive them off to Glacier for long-term retention. They're all encrypted, and you can turn on log file validation. One best practice for CloudTrail log files is to have them delivered to a separate account, an account with very minimal privileges, one where your audit or your security people have read-only access. And this will stop any potential for tampering of those CloudTrail log files, and then you can use them for any incident investigation that may need to happen if something happens in your AWS account. The information that gets recorded by CloudTrail in each event, so timestamps obviously, the location where the action was taken, what the event name was, where the source came from, which user or principal initiated the event or transaction, what the action was and what the parameters were. So I've just got a quick example of what it is. Don't worry too much about the formatting. We do a lot of stuff in JSON. But at the top, you can see the user identity section, account IDs, access keys. In the middle here, you can see the details about the event time, source, and then down the bottom, you can see like request parameters and response elements. So this was a create user event, and where we created a user called Bob. So VPC flow logs. They're basically net flow logs for things that occur within your virtual private cloud. You can turn on flow logging on a network interface, on a subnet, or for your entire VPC. And that will then enable a record to be captured for every attempted connection and every connection that occurs on the scope that you've defined. So all accept, rejects, or both of them together. This can assist with troubleshooting and also identifying any suspicious traffic that's occurring where people are trying to make connections that are not allowed by your security group or network ACL configurations. This is what they look like. It'll look quite familiar to you if you have looked at any NetFlow statistics. One thing to note, this is the metadata about a connection. This doesn't include any of the actual traffic. It does include the AWS account, the interfaces, source and destination IP addresses, ports, number of packets, number of bytes sent, start and end times, and whether the connection was accepted or rejected. You can take the information from VPC flow logs and send it straight through CloudTrail, or you can pump it into an S3 bucket, or you can have it sent to an Elasticsearch cluster. And this is like a Kibana dashboard that's visualizing some of this information for the VPC flow logs and checking, seeing which traffic's being delivered to where. So GuardDuty. This is the exciting new service that was launched at reInvent last year, and this builds on top of the services that I've just talked about. So CloudTrail, VPC flow logs, but it also looks at the DNS information for any DNS lookups that occurred within your account. So what it'll do is it will process all of this information and continuously monitor your account for suspicious activity. It can detect known bad events, and it also uses machine learning to detect anomalous behaviour, so it's unknown things that might look suspicious. At the end of that processing, it will give you detailed and actionable findings that you can use to secure things that are going on with your account. I've had quite a few customers turn it on, and honestly, nobody's had a clean bill of health. Everybody has had something that's worth investigating, be it anomalous traffic coming from a host, something that was broken that was trying to contact something else that wasn't allowed that needed to be remediated. Very useful information. I highly recommend you look at it. So I've got small customers and large customers using GuardDuty. So at the small end, one of my customers has it turned on their production accounts, and it's costing them $2, $3 a month. For one of my biggest customers, on a VPC with hundreds of active developers and deployments happening every day, that costs them on the order of about $5 a day. So that's kind of what you can expect to pay, but I feel that the security that this is going to give you is priceless. So how does it work? So GuardDuty consumes the feeds of information from your CloudTrail, your VPC logs and your DNS records. It also pulls in security feeds from other sources. So AWS Security feeds information into it. We subscribe to some commercial feeds and open source feeds that provide information on like, malware, botnets, that sort of thing, and phishing websites. So we can alert you if that comes up. These help with detecting malware-infected hosts, things that are anonymizing proxies that are potentially allowing access to information that you don't want or might allow exfiltration of data. If you get hit with cryptocurrency mining, malware, it can detect a lot of the traffic going to command and control botnets and that sort of stuff. How does it detect unknown threats? So this is where we do anomaly detection on your data. We have a team of highly skilled data scientists and security specialists who are building machine learning models that will look for anomalous transactions and anomalous patterns in your data. So it can detect if you have suspicious activity occurring via your CloudTrail logs. So if somebody's all of a sudden performing a lot of actions that haven't been performed before, it can pull that up. Or if there's network traffic or DNS requests that are out of the norm, it can detect those and alert you on them before anybody's even aware that there is a potential zero-day vulnerability or new threat, emerging threat. So this is an example of an attempted compromise in the account. And these are the steps that might occur. And then here are all of the points that GuardDuty could detect this occurring. So it can detect the initial reconnaissance, if there's suspicious IPs sending traffic to your network, unusual traffic volumes, DNS exfiltration attempts. You get the idea. AWS configuration and config rules. So AWS config is like a CMDB for the cloud. But unlike all CMDBs that I've worked with in the past, it will automatically keep track of all of the resources that you've turned this on for and record their state information and track that through time. So, and then it will present that data to you. In the GUI, you can then go and have a look at the state of that information and then wind it back to see where the state was at any particular point in time. Using config rules, you can also build rules to enforce your policy on top of that configuration information. So you can detect when any of the items stored in config will go out of policy. If somebody opens up a port that shouldn't be opened up, that can be detected via a rule, and then you can be alerted on that. If somebody takes an S3 bucket containing sensitive information and you've configured a config rule to say, please notify us every time somebody makes an S3 bucket public, it will detect that on the event change and then notify you. So it's a very powerful tool that comes with a platform that you can use to enforce your policy on top of all of the resources supported by AWS configuration. So I'm sure all of you know what a configuration item is and what a CMDB is, but it just stores the attributes and the metadata for that information, for those items that it's turned on for. The relationships, the current configuration, and any events that might be related to it via CloudTrail. So this can also be used for debugging. So if something's gone wrong, you can use AWS config to have a look at any changes that might have occurred in your platform, and then wind that back to see where those changes occurred and what the state was prior to those changes being made. More JSON for you. This is just the expanded list of that information I presented in the previous slide. Don't need to worry too much about this. It's just good to get an idea of the sections in this file, including like the metadata, the common attributes for that type of resource, relationships between this resource and other resources. So if this is a disk, on what server has it been mounted? And then any related events that might have occurred to this event. So we've talked about AWS config rules a little bit. There's two types of rules that you can implement with config rules. So AWS Managed Rules, so where we detect a lot of customers implementing the same functionality, we will provide you a managed rule. So the example I gave you before of an S3 bucket, detecting if that became public, there's an AWS Managed Rule for that, and then we'll take care of updating that. You can turn it on and just configure it rather than having to code it. If you want to go beyond that, you can use a customer managed rules. And what you can do with that is author a Lambda function, and that Lambda function will get triggered on the event changes or the action, or when something's triggered that you've specified. And then you can use your Lambda code to perform whatever sort of checks against your policy that you require. As I said, they can be triggered by state changes. So like if an EC2 instance changes state from a stock to a running state, you can trigger it. Or running to degraded, you can trigger a rule. That might also be useful for maintenance purposes. So you could put a rule that says anytime an EC2 instance goes into the degraded state, notify the operations team. And you can also have rules that are triggered periodically. So if you want to enforce continual compliance, that's another way of doing this. This is a sample code written in Node of what you might do to parse an event. Don't worry too much about the details. It's just good to know that it's possible that you can customize config rules.